Let's get started with invisibility. With the ability to disappear, reappear behind the person's ear or to their rear and become completely see-through and clear. That was kind of funny. Users of this extremely common ability can render themselves unseen by the naked eye and become invisible within visible spectrum. The user can move about the environment unseen by others and act without being observed. Some users can choose to let certain people see them while staying invisible to others. And you guys know what's coming next. Invisibility, or the act of being invisible, is the state of being unable to be seen or just not visible to the eye. Boom! Simple as that. No more, no less. And just like the definition, explaining the importance behind this power is gonna be pretty easy. A user of this power can use this ability to increase their stealth capabilities, duh, manipulate the target's perception, double duh, and have an affinity towards light-based physics. Ooh, that's pretty interesting. They can also learn to manipulate light that passes through them for various effects. They can even mimic the nature of the #1 user of this power, aka Ghost, and or manipulate the laws of nature by becoming the physical embodiment of the Schrodinger's cat experiment. You don't know what that is? Check that out. Although you can get down and nasty with an ability like this, it's still fairly limited, or should I say simple, in what exactly it can do, or how you can do it. But that doesn't mean we nerd and nerdettes can't get a little creative. And how would one go about doing this? Well, the first thing I would tell you is don't worry about cleaning your eyes. They won't be of much help to you, because the information about to smack you right in the face can't be seen. So if you're not careful, you could end up in a fight with John Cena, and there's no point of fighting that guy because you can't see him. So don't worry, Shay's got a solution. I think you guys know what it is. That's right, hitting that like and subscribe button. Not only will this give you the ability to literally see what I'm talking about, but you can also brag to your homies and your homettes that you can see dead people. But if you don't need my help and you're gonna feel the way you feel towards the answers I plan on giving you anyway, because that's just what you do, then at least help the channel out by hitting that share button. If you guys are just here for the applications, associations, and uses and users for this power, then skip ahead to this time. But if you guys see what I can see, then watch your head, because invisible things are still gonna fly towards you. Like seriously, duck. Origins of invisibility? Easy. Neglected children. Mic drop! Oh crap, that wasn't appropriate, was it? Okay, let's try that again. The origins of invisibility can be argued and conflated with other concepts such as darkness and the human senses, in the sense that they kind of build off of each other. Legends and myths have had tales of ethereal beings found in all cultures who, in addition to not being able to be grasped, also add insult to injury as they couldn't be seen either. The list is endless, from gods and devils to ghosts and spirits, all the way to trickster beings who move so fast it appears as invisibility. Heck, even the source of energy that animates your corpse is thought to be invisible. But this also applies to our more rule-bound and logical view of the world that we carry today, as some forms of matter are completely out of our range of detectability. Air molecules? Well, they're either so spread far apart or so small that our eyes can't pick up on them. Most forms of energy that power our world are also invisible. I mentioned air just now, but there's also heat, cold, electricity that isn't powerful enough but instead causes a static shock in some cases. Physical force itself doesn't have a visible color and is left up to interpretation in most cases. Most odors don't have a visible form either. And sound? Don't get me started on sound. Sound can't be seen at all, let alone actual music. And the various fundamental forces of the universe, ranging from gravity to magnetism, can't be detected by our eyes either. This continues on to the maybe baby substances that are dark matter and dark energy, which make up about 90% of our universe. They can't be seen or detected either. Okay, so it's better to get this boring part out the way. There's no such thing as true invisibility, at least the way we understand it. Just like there's no such thing as cold, it's just a lack of heat to varying degrees. And in the case of invisibility, before we go on, there are different types. And I'm not going to list them in any particular order, but we more or less use them to classify varying types of invisibility. And they are transparency, which is something's ability to be clear or see-through, like air or water. Translucence, the ability to allow light to pass through but not showing any distinct images on the other side, like sunglasses or tinted windows. And opacity, which is the condition of lacking transparency or translucence, which is basically opaqueness, basically meaning you can't see through it at all. How visibility actually works consists of what can be seen by the observer on the electromagnetic spectrum, meaning if a user is unexceptional like me, you would only be able to see what my weak eyes can detect, and I wear glasses, so. But out of the numerous wavelengths that do exist with their own varying effects, we humans can only detect visible light. Well, I know only I can. I got a plan for that, don't worry. But when referring to invisibility, I would say its number one associated power would be intangibility, which I've done a video on, and to a lesser extent, illusions, which I've done a video on as well. Check that out, the link is in the description. But mostly intangibility because the concepts associated with it, such as ghost and or spirits, or the down-to-earth versions such as air, vapor, gas, light, energy, or darkness, pretty much get that little detail away. You see, humans are very simple creatures, and in our heads, the fact that I can see you means I should be able to touch interact with you. And in the case of invisibility, the fact that I can't see you makes me hope I don't randomly touch you or give the impression of randomly touching something I can't perceive. That's extremely unnerving. Planet Fitness bathroom levels of unnerving. So when it comes to the senses, if invisibility is used, it's obvious that the sense of sight will be a major source of conflict, and to a lesser extent, hearing. It's pretty well accepted that most objects make noise while moving, so hearing something you can't see would send most people running in the other direction. Especially me. I'd be first, so move! So with all that being said, it's not a coincidence that unnatural powers such as these are conflated with concepts that induce uneasy or unnatural impressions in people. But why is this power so important to us? What is it about invisibility that makes humans jump through hoops in order to understand it? Well, the answer is even simpler, because we feel the need to explain invisibility. Nature of invisibility in its core is uncertainty, or at least unpredictability and undetectability. And we humans love being able to detect and classify things. It makes us feel smart and in control. Going back in time, humans have always been group animals and have had to work together to survive from time immemorial. Even to the present day, being on your own was essentially a death sentence. If you joined a group, you wanted to be noticed and respected as someone who had a purpose so you could continue to have access to that group's resources and protection. Being unseen and unnoticed or not making an impact got in the way of survival. And from that perspective of the group, the people who have the stuff that you want, if I have my eye on you, I can predict you somewhat and protect the group from what we can see coming. So, if I can isolate you as worthless or unworthy, then I can ignore you, and whatever happens to you, that's whatever happens to you. This is the dark principle of invisibility that can be found in our modern world in the form of the lower caste system of the world, which is normally dubbed untouchables. But if you don't want to get too deep into that, all you have to remember is that it's a fact of this concept that anything we sort of understand and things we definitely don't understand, and even things we don't want to understand, can just be explained away by titling it invisible. This power, just in the same way darkness manipulation has done, check that video out, has shaped the world and popular culture in uncountable ways. Illusion manipulation, which shares major parallels with this power, go check that video out, the link is in the description, has done the same, but the innate aspects that those abilities share with this one, it would be horror. Not because we can't see invisibility, so that's what makes it scary, because by itself it really isn't, but it's usually what uses the invisibility that we can't see that leads to the creation of myth and legends, and in turn becomes what we later fear. That's why we more or less have popular idioms such as invisible to the naked eye, that eye usually belonging to a human of some sort, or others similar to it, because the power of invisibility is very much subjective and depends on who the power is being used on. That's why when it comes to abilities that affect perception, you're never going to get the full story, and everything is going to be looked at in a form of a neutral light, or at least in the gray areas. And the sense of sight is where this ability lives and dies. So symbolically, invisibility symbolizes the unknown and a lack of detectability in addition to secretiveness. And that aspect of this ability makes it perhaps the laziest power to ever use, because whoever you're going to have to go up against is going to have to do all the hard work of countering and figuring out what you can do. A main example being the parameters of your invisibility, which, mind you, can be done in hundreds of ways, all that have the same result, the lack of sight. Let's think about it. This vague ability includes, but is not limited to, hiding behind someone or something bigger than you. I mean, technically speaking, the line of sight was broken, so you're undetected, aka invisible. Okay, cool. Well, what about someone who doesn't have a scent or make noise, and thus creatures who depend on senses other than sight can't track them? Well, to those creatures, you're technically invisible. Okay, well, what about a user just having the ability to shrink so fast they disappear from your visible sight? That's still a form of invisibility. Okay, well, what about someone who can chameleon? That's definitely camouflage, not invisibility as we think about it, but is there really a difference? You still can't see them. Okay. Well, how about someone or thing that moves so fast you can't keep track? Well, if they're still interacting with light, you just can't perceive it. So that's invisibility too when concerning you. All right, last one. Well, what if they're standing right next to you, breathing on your neck, sharing the same physical space as you, but you can't detect them, as the user of this power is making all your senses ignore them via mental manipulation? Well, that's still invisibility. Shoot, they can even exist on a different plane of existence. Well, just because people on that plane can see them, you can't, so they are still invisible to you. Or if the user is tripping on their own power rivaling God level, they could turn you invisible at such a level that you vanish from observable existence, still alive, just unnoticed in a void, and so on and so on. But continuing with invisibility as a superpower, characters with this ability are often coupled with the themes of isolation and alienation, as the invisible character's ability marks them as an outcast. This makes sense though, because if they chose a path that allows them to use their powers, they'd more or less be suited to more stealth-based tasks versus frontline fighting. Because more often than not, an invisible person will usually have this power and nothing else. Although, very rarely, this power will allow them to wield invisible force fields that can be shaped like 3D constructs. The first modern media examples of this ability was the original Invisible Man from H.G. Wells, that book you read in middle school, who became a sociopathic loner because of his condition. And from there, numerous other tropes have been created, ranging from the hidden world trope, a plane of existence that's invisible to anyone not attuned to it, or the I'm invisible and you're invisible, so now we can see each other but no one else can see us kind of trope. Regardless of how you want to show it, in many of these series that have already been established, the invisible character is temporarily invisible, which can strain normal personal ties in their life, making their life more difficult because they have to deal with their new condition. Or it can end up being permanent, and in such cases, it's usually treated like some kind of curse, even if the user is positive about it. This can also be given to the user in many different ways, and thus it really doesn't have a true origin of how you can get this power. But because of human culture and our normal general negative view towards the unseen, most users who normally get this power are seen as something tragic or accidental, never on purpose. It can be from cosmic rays, a science experiment gone wrong, a magical spell or curse that interferes with your freedom, or even precise mental manipulation or illusion manipulation. And because superpowers, like anything else, would affect the body and thus the mind, aka personality of said user, having them be shy and cautious, cowardly, or sneaky, even subversive and manipulative is pretty much a given. And that could be their character arc, coming out of their metaphorical shell and growing a backbone of some sort, or treating others better. While on the more lighthearted side of the scale, use of invisibility is always comedic and followed up by various attempts at tomfoolery and then immediately used to teach the main character or whoever has this ability a lesson. This can range from showing how running from your problems doesn't help to showing a grass isn't greener on the other side scenario. But you should expect newly invisible characters to make a point out of realizing that they can't see themselves. But that aspect of this power is usually ignored because it's too complicated to get into. Or maybe it's too time consuming, who knows? But what we do know is that if honestly, someone gained the power of invisibility, the learning curve would be extremely steep, even for the smartest and the most coordinated among us, which I am not. And if you think about it, that just makes rational sense. How is you going to learn if you can't see? Because transparent organs? Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, Organic matter works best when it can't become transparent. And FYI, invisible eyeballs result in blindness, and invisible arms and legs mean no heat. The light has nothing to bounce off of. So if you needed to see, but still needed to be invisible, you'd have to exist as floating eyeballs, which defeats the purpose altogether. Nothing more noticeable than floating eyeballs. Maybe a floating brain too, but hey, nah. It's proven that our sense of balance and spatial awareness comes from our ability to actually see what we're doing. So without seeing your body, your coordination would plummet and cause a monkey to look more graceful. And that's just on the lighter side of the effect scale. On the harsher side, you could forget how to use them or not be able to control them while they're invisible because you're not sure that they're there. Implied nudity is another recurring element of this ability. Regardless of the invisible character's sex, clothing is rarely affected, so it kinda defeats the purpose if you ask me. They'll normally hand wave it and make the entire person invisible, clothes included. Me personally though, I think most showrunners love scenes where invisibility plays a big role because it's just less work on their end. They don't have to draw anything. All they gotta do is make sure that the voice acting is on point. I think I came to that conclusion as a kid after watching that SpongeBob episode. You know, the one with the invisible spray? I love that episode. Common colors associated with invisibility are clear. I know clear isn't a color, that's the point. If you wanted to stylize it though, take a page from The Invisible Woman and go with a translucent white or bluish white energy constructs kind of thing. And in a metaphysical kind of way, they are still invisible to the characters in the stories. The outlines are just there for us. So, typical stats for an ability like this are low to no levels of attack power, low to medium levels of speed, and low to medium levels of defense. More low often than not, because the theme of this ability is stealth, so anything goes against that goes against this power. This power's list going to be a little different than how I do others, mainly the manipulation ability. So let's just see where this goes. See. With the power of invisibility comes the natural ability to actually turn yourself invisible. This can be done selectively by partially shifting a chosen body part with partial invisibility. And if you decide to take that ability to the next level and are willing to shift your entire body into a state of undetectability, then that should also extend to any form of odor and or scent that your body produces because you're invisible with inodorosity. And while you're masking your scent, then extend that liberty to the sound your body produces by turning your sound invisible, I don't even know how you do that, with inaudibility. And with all the previously mentioned applications listed, it would be pretty stupid to think that you wouldn't be able to literally avoid attempts to be discovered with tracking evasion and enhanced stealth. I guess I'll do a video on enhanced stealth a little bit later. And since you have the basic applications down when it comes to personal mastery, the next step is to shift that power outward and channel transparency into whatever they decide to make physical contact with, usually a weapon, but this can really be anything you desire, via invisibility transfusion. Or one can kick this ability into overdrive and channel larger amounts of translucent-based energy or coating or whatever you want to use to turn an outside target into a see-through-like state covering a much larger area than just simple infusion via invisibility extension. And with all the previously mentioned, it would make sense that a user and the surrounding targets can live the life of a pacifist, possessing a large degree of undetectability with unnoticeability. Or if living the non-violent and shrinking violet lifestyle isn't something that you can see for yourself, I did it again, see? Well, then infuse invisibility into whatever combative capabilities you possess in perhaps one of the most trollish ways to fight someone with invisibility combat. Or, if you really want to stretch the bounds of this ability, to even the playing field with the more overpowered abilities, then theoretically, since you can control your own personal visibility, if one is talented enough, they would be able to stretch this ability into controlling the very concept of invisibility. What do I mean by that? Okay, well, think about it. Gravity, that's invisible. Sound, that's pretty invisible too. Air, traditional depictions of ghosts or other psychic or telekinetic effects, they're all invisible. Well, at least on certain frequencies. So take that info and control the force that gives them all a common theme, aka invisible energy, with invisible energy manipulation. This ability can look like anything from telekinesis to gravity control, magnetism. As long as it's invisible, you can explain it away. Out of sight, literally. I am not funny. Okay, with all the many ways this power can be used out the way, the only thing left to do is cover the different ways that this power can be portrayed. Remember guys, if the user eliminates visibility in any way, it's a form of this power. This isn't an official list, so don't go looking holding me to this. I just listed things like this to make it easier to grasp and to spark your imaginations. So, let's go. Conditional visibility gives the user the ability to become invisible to some and only visible to certain other people, and then only by certain conditions. With camouflage, the user can visually blend into surroundings by appearing to merge with the coloration and form of their background to avoid optical perception. Think chameleons or snipers. Users of shadow camouflage are able to become undetectable as long as they're inside darkness or shadow. Obviously, without light, they are all but visible. Think about nocturnal predators or the boogeyman, shoot, or even Batman. Now, users of invisible speed have something special to work with, as the user is able to move at a speed beyond the visual perception of whoever is viewing them, literally becoming a blur. Fun fact about this one, your speed can vary depending on how fast the observer is and how, I guess, they view you. While you won't have a consistent level of speed normally, you'll still be faster than whoever tries to see you. And with elemental invisibility, users can become indistinguishable from any element they have an affinity for. Normally found in elementals or characters who choose to mimic their chosen elemental substance, these types are limited only by their element's quality and quantity. From there, we move on to selective invisibility, which allows the user to become invisible to anyone they choose in a more controlled manner, meaning that some can see them and some cannot, barring, ridiculous conditions. The best example of this applies mostly to technological systems like motion sensors or thermal detectors, or monitoring devices like cameras, because they can more or less filter said level of visibility detection or adjust and change it when needed, basically hopping on different spectrums and whatnot. So following that up, with technological invisibility, you should be able to circumvent this and render yourself undetectable to any form of technology. The funny thing about this power is that the user can either be invisible literally or not, depending on the type of ability they have. Because this only affects tech, this can be done through the use of technology or through other creative methods. And while we're at it, the most popular form of technological invisibility is found in your stereotypical bubble shield that can block most forms of electromagnetic signals trying to detect them via cloaking shield construction. Yeah, now we get to the good part. With supernatural concealment, the user can hide from anything, and I mean anything. This includes but is not limited to humans, other animals, supernatural entities such as angels, demons, ghosts, spirits, sprites, cryptic creatures, and possibly even deities. In short, the user can't be found unless they want to be. This can be done numerous ways, but the most humble of them all is perhaps doing it under your own power with no explainable help, so it still remains a supernatural phenomenon by definition. By using the energy your body naturally produces to cloak yourself towards a form of undetectability, to shutting off the outward flow of your life force with chi invisibility. This can also have the user visually disappear and or make you imperceivable to anyone who tries to use their life energy to find you. But if you want to be a little bit more forceful, then you can always use your big brain powers to manipulate your visibility with telekinetic invisibility. And since we're on the subject of controlling what one sees by force with the mind, then we need to add telepathic invisibility to that as well, because what's more sinister than doing a little nip and tuck to someone's memory center so they either forget you as soon as they see you, or make it to where they just can't visualize you because you paralyze their perception centers. This allows you to make yourself visible to everyone except your target, and even worse, you can take the form of someone else. Dare I say, someone familiar to them? Like I said before, if you aren't who they're looking for, you're technically invisible. And depending on the proficiency of the user, they might be invisible literally, or they can still be visible physically, just invisible to mental-based detection effects. Or if you want to completely throw away any rational manner of trying to explain this power, then tap into the metaphysical and the esoteric energies that may or may not exist, because invisibility, with magical invisibility. In addition to that, the user cannot be detected by any kind of magic, which essentially makes magical detection powers useless. And depending on the type of ability possessed, once again, the user can be invisible literally, or they can still be visible physically, just invisible to magic effects or magic detection. And last but certainly not least, a user of absolute concealment can render themselves unseen and unfindable by anything, making them unable to be visually, physically, conceptually, etc. detected by any means, by magic, technology, divine beings, etc. At this level, you are basically giving the gift of Schrodinger's cat to yourself or anyone you use this on. As there still technically exists, they just can't be perceived. Not even enough to stay within the current space-time continuum, if you choose to look at it as such. So they'll just slip away into some kind of eldritch void outside of known existence, alone. There are infinite ways to portray this example, and all of them psychologically horrifying. And there you have it, invisibility in a nutshell. After all that list, this power does seem a little bit cooler now, but it's still chock with problems. Let's not even overlook that. Remember what I said about light invisibility literally being the domain of the electromagnetic spectrum? Wait, I didn't? I could have sworn I did. Well, even if I didn't, I am now. Any form of visibility or invisibility that you use will only be useful if the target needs that form of perception. Not to mention, you have to figure out what wavelength of the spectrum you need to exclude in order to make effective use of this ability. And make sure that the target can't find you another way, like heat, smell, or touch, because the main trick of this ability is its innate deception factor. So once that's neutralized, it's pretty much over for you. Other than that, there's really no need to use this power, as it really can't help you cook or open doors for you. Or can it? I might make a video on how that's possible. But anyway, a user of this ability might not be able to control their invisibility, and thus they might be subject to whatever wacky scenarios that entails. They might have a weird condition such as only turning themselves or other things selectively invisible, or even more personal, the user's own knowledge, skills, and strengths will determine how far you go or they go with an ability like this. And now, with all that out of the way, it's time to place this ability on the scale. Invisibility is something that it really isn't as cool as we think it is. It might have its uses in a idealistic world, but it really wouldn't be needed, unlike other powers. Maybe. So on a scale of 1 to 10, the Shey scaling system gives this power a see-through 5. A power with its pros and cons, and to be honest with you, this power can do some pretty outrageous things if you have the eye for it. More puns. Thanks for watching. You guys think of any more applications for this power? Jot it down in the comments section. Start a discussion. The index doesn't grow without you. I'll be back with an entirely new power, breakdown, and analysis pretty soon. Deuces.